Title: Whispers of the Unseen. Chapter 1. The Gift. Emily had always known she was different. While other children chased fireflies and giggled under the summer sky, she lingered in shadows, captivated by the whispers that danced just beyond her reach. Her gift, or curse, as her father often referred to it, was one she had tried to ignore. But the voices came, unbidden and insistent, weaving tales of sorrow and unfinished business that tugged at her heart. The old house creaked like a living thing, its wooden bones groaning as it settled into the night. With each passing day, the walls felt closer, closing in around her like a tightening noose. The faint sounds of the outside world filtered through the dusty windows, but inside, a heavy silence reigned, broken only by the murmurs of the unseen. Emily would sit cross-legged on her bedroom floor, clutching her favorite teddy bear, Mr. Whiskers, while shadows flickered along the walls like the last breaths of the departed. On the night of her 11th birthday, Emily had been filled with anticipation, her heart racing with the hope of a celebration. But as she sat at the dinner table, the weight of disappointment hung thick in the air. Her father had forgotten again, lost in his work and worry. The cake lay untouched, the candles flickering mournfully, and as the clock chimed 8, Emily felt the familiar pang of loneliness twist in her chest. "Emily, go to your room," her father said tersely, barely looking up from his papers. "I have things to do." She nodded silently, her heart sinking. "Okay, Dad." The familiar sting of rejection settled in her throat as she retreated to the sanctuary of her room where the shadows welcomed her like old friends. Once behind closed doors, Emily took a deep breath, attempting to shake off the disappointment. She climbed onto her bed, pulling the covers tightly around her, cocooning herself from the world outside. Mr. Whiskers sat beside her, a comforting presence in the darkness. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. But Emily knew these shadows harbored secrets. Just as she began to drift off to sleep, she heard the whispers, a soft, haunting melody that floated through the air, drawing her from the edges of slumber. She sat up, heart racing, and listened closely. The words were indecipherable, but the tone was urgent, filled with longing. "Help me. Please." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The voice was unlike any she had heard before. It was not a comforting presence like Lily, the girl ghost she had met last summer. This voice was heavy with despair, laced with a deep sadness that made her shiver. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and slipped into the chilly air of her room, feeling the cold wooden floor beneath her bare feet. "Who are you?" she called softly, her voice trembling. "What do you want?" The room fell silent, and for a moment, Emily thought she had imagined it. Then, the air thickened with tension, and she felt a presence swirl around her, pulling her deeper into the shadows. "Help me!" The voice pleaded again, more insistent this time. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, Emily stepped toward the closet, the source of the voice. She opened the door, the hinges creaking like a ghostly wail. Inside, her clothes hung motionless, but in the far corner, something shifted. A figure emerged from the darkness, a girl about her age, with tattered clothes and hollow eyes that glowed like dying embers. "Who are you?" Emily gasped, stepping back. The girl's face was pale, almost translucent, as if she had been formed from mist and moonlight. "I'm Alice," the ghostly girl replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I need your help. I can't rest." Emily felt a chill creep down her spine, a mixture of fear and empathy flooding her senses. "What happened to you?" Alice's gaze shifted to the floor, her expression sorrowful. "I was lost, trapped between the worlds. My family, they forgot me. They didn't know I was gone." Her voice trembled as she spoke, a haunting echo of sorrow that filled the air. Emily's heart ached at the sight of the forlorn spirit. "How can I help you?" "You must find my locket," Alice whispered, her eyes widening with urgency. "It holds my memories. Without it, I can't move on." "Where is it?" Emily asked, feeling the weight of the ghost's desperation. "In the woods behind your house. There's an old oak tree where I used to play. You have to hurry before the darkness takes me completely." Fear gripped Emily's heart. The woods were forbidden territory. Her father had warned her countless times never to venture there alone. "I don't know if I can," she stammered, glancing toward the window where the moon cast an eerie glow on the tree branches. "Please," Alice implored, stepping closer, her face now filled with a mix of hope and despair. "If you don't help me, I'll be trapped forever." The sincerity in Alice's eyes pierced through Emily's fear. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'll do it," she promised, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll find your locket." Alice smiled faintly, a flicker of relief crossing her features. "Thank you, Emily, but you must be careful. The woods are not safe. The darkness watches, waiting for the weak." With that warning echoing in her mind, Emily watched as Alice began to fade, her figure dissolving into the shadows like smoke. "I'll be waiting," she murmured before vanishing completely. Heart pounding, Emily returned to her bed, her mind racing with thoughts of the woods. She had heard the stories, the tales of lost children and vengeful spirits that roamed the forest. But now, the urgency of Alice's plea burned in her chest. The girl needed her help, and Emily couldn't turn her back on someone in need. After what felt like hours of tossing and turning, Emily finally drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by nightmares filled with dark shadows and echoing whispers. The image of Alice lingered, a ghostly reminder of the task ahead. Morning came too soon, the sun rising timidly behind a veil of clouds. Emily awoke with a start, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her chest. She dressed quickly, her heart racing as she prepared to face the unknown. "Emily!" her father barked from downstairs, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "Get ready! We have work to do." She hesitated, knowing that the chores waiting for her would only delay her mission. "I'm coming," she called back, forcing a smile to mask her anxiety. But as she made her way downstairs, dread clawed at her insides. She had to find that locket. The morning passed in a blur of mundane tasks. Her father worked tirelessly in his study, often snapping at her for minor mistakes. Each time he raised his voice, Emily felt a chill run down her spine, a reminder of how fragile their relationship had become. Finally, as the afternoon sun dipped low in the sky, Emily found her chance. "Dad, I'm going for a walk," she announced, trying to keep her voice steady. "Stay close to the house," he warned without looking up from his papers, "and don't wander into the woods." His words struck a chord of rebellion within her. Ignoring the knot of fear in her stomach, Emily nodded and slipped out the back door, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The path to the woods was familiar, a trail she had walked countless times. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting and curling like fingers reaching for the sky. As she stepped onto the cool, damp earth, the air thickened, wrapping around her like a shroud. The deeper she ventured into the woods, the more the light faded. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, whispering secrets she could not comprehend. The path grew narrow, the trees closing in around her like a fortress of darkness. Emily's heart raced as she pushed onward, the urgency of Alice's plight driving her forward. After what felt like an eternity, she finally reached the old oak tree. Its gnarled branches twisted high above, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. Emily approached the tree, feeling a strange pull toward its ancient trunk. It seemed to beckon her closer, as if it held the secrets of the past within its roots. Kneeling at the base of the tree, she began to dig, her fingers scraping against the cool earth. "Please let me find it," she whispered to herself, her heart racing with hope and fear. As she unearthed the dirt, memories flooded back. Alice's laughter, the urgency in her voice, the haunting sadness that had filled the air. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. She gasped, pulling the object from the ground. It was a locket, ornate and weathered, adorned with intricate designs that glinted in the faint light. Holding it tightly, Emily felt a surge of energy coursing through her, a connection to the spirit she had vowed to help. "Alice!" she cried, her voice echoing through the trees. "I found it!" The air around her shimmered, and for a moment, she thought she saw Alice's form appear before her, a flicker of hope amidst the shadows. But as quickly as it came, the vision faded, leaving Emily alone in the oppressive silence of the woods. With the locket clutched tightly in her hand, she turned to leave, but the atmosphere shifted. The shadows thickened, swirling around her like a dark mist. The air grew colder, and an unsettling sensation prickled at the back of her neck. "Who dares disturb my domain?" a voice growled, deep and menacing, sending chills racing down her spine. The darkness pulsed, and Emily felt the very ground beneath her tremble. "Leave me alone!" she shouted, fear igniting her adrenaline. She stumbled backward, clutching the locket as if it were a lifeline. "Foolish child!" the voice boomed, echoing through the trees. "You've awakened the darkness. You cannot escape it." Panic surged through Emily as she turned to run, but the shadows lunged at her, wrapping around her limbs like icy tendrils. The weight of despair pressed down, suffocating her. "I must get back to Alice," she gasped, fighting against the darkness that threatened to consume her. With every ounce of strength, Emily broke free from the shadows, racing back toward the path. She could feel the darkness clawing at her heels, whispering insidious promises that tempted her to turn back. "You cannot escape your fate," it hissed. But she pushed onward, driven by the urgency of her mission. She had to return the locket to Alice. The spirits had always been her friends, and now she would fight for them, even if it meant facing the very darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. As she burst out of the woods, the sunlight hit her like a wave of warmth, dispelling the chill that had enveloped her. Gasping for breath, she stumbled toward her house, the locket held tightly in her hand. The darkness may have followed her, but Emily was no longer afraid. She had faced the shadows and emerged stronger, ready to fulfill her promise to Alice. And as she stepped back into her home, she knew the battle was only just beginning. Famadier, this chapter establishes Emily's gift and her connection to the spirit world while introducing the darkness that lurks beneath her father's oppressive rule. It sets the stage for her journey and the challenges she will face as she tries to help Alice and navigate her complicated relationship with her father. Chapter 2. The First Encounter. The following days after Emily's encounter with Alice were a blend of anticipation and dread. The locket, still clutched tightly in her hand, felt warm against her palm, pulsing with an energy she couldn't quite understand. It was a tangible link to the ghostly girl who had reached out to her in the depths of despair. Despite her father's increasing hostility and his warnings about spirits, Emily felt drawn to the locket, as if it held the key to a world waiting to be unveiled. Each night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows in her room growing longer and darker as the hours crept by. She could hear the wind rustling outside, the trees whispering secrets to one another, and she felt the weight of Alice's request heavy on her heart. "Help me." The words echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain, pulling her deeper into the night's embrace. On the third night after finding the locket, Emily could no longer contain her curiosity. With the moon casting a silvery glow through her window, she decided to summon Alice. Sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, she placed the locket before her, the intricate designs catching the light. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to speak softly. "Alice, if you can hear me, I have your locket. I want to help you." At first there was silence, thick and oppressive, wrapping around her like a fog. But then the air grew colder, and the shadows in the corners of her room began to shift and twist. Emily opened her eyes, heart racing. She felt a chill seep into her bones, and she instinctively reached for Mr. Whiskers, squeezing him tightly for comfort. The temperature in the room plummeted, and a ghostly mist began to form before her, swirling like smoke. It took shape, coalescing into the familiar figure of Alice, her face pale and ethereal, eyes shimmering with an otherworldly light. "Emily," Alice whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze that sent shivers down Emily's spine. "You found it." "I did," Emily exclaimed, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. "I have your locket. What do I do with it?" Alice floated closer, her presence both comforting and unnerving. "You must help me remember," she said, her voice trembling. "The locket contains the memories of my life. If you can unlock them, perhaps I can finally find peace." As Alice spoke, Emily felt an overwhelming wave of compassion wash over her. She could see the sadness in the ghost's eyes, a deep well of sorrow that reached into the very depths of her being. "But how do I unlock it?" she asked, searching Alice's gaze for answers. "You must touch it while thinking of me," Alice instructed, her voice filled with urgency. "But be careful. The darkness that haunts me is always watching. It will try to stop you." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. The darkness. She had felt it before, lurking at the edges of her consciousness, waiting to pounce. But for Alice, she would face it. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the locket, feeling its cool metal against her fingertips. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. As she closed her eyes, Emily concentrated on Alice, recalling the ghostly girl's laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her life. She thought of the games they had played, the friendship that had blossomed amidst the shadows. With trembling fingers, she pressed the locket to her heart and whispered, "Alice, I'm here. I want to help you remember." At that moment, a surge of energy shot through her, and the room erupted into a whirlwind of sound and light. Emily felt as though she were being pulled into another dimension, the boundaries of her reality blurring around her. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices swirling around her like a tempest. Suddenly, the world shifted, and Emily found herself standing in a lush, sunlit meadow. The air was fragrant with wildflowers, and a gentle breeze rustled through the grass. It was a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness she had just left behind. "Welcome to my memory," Alice's voice echoed, now vibrant and full of life. She stood beside Emily, her form shimmering like sunlight. "This is where I used to play." Emily gazed around, awestruck by the beauty of the scene. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking a step forward. The meadow felt alive, filled with the warmth of sunlight and the sweet sound of laughter in the distance. But as they walked further into the memory, a shadow loomed on the horizon, darkening the vibrant colors around them. Emily felt a shiver crawl up her spine as the warmth faded, replaced by a chilling dread. "What is that?" she asked, pointing toward the encroaching darkness. "It's him," Alice replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The darkness that follows me. He feeds on fear and sadness. He doesn't want me to remember." Emily's heart raced. "What can we do?" "We must move quickly," Alice urged, her eyes wide with urgency. "The longer we stay, the stronger he becomes. Touch the locket again. It will guide us." As Emily clutched the locket, she felt the warmth of Alice's presence, the flicker of hope amidst the growing shadows. With renewed determination, she focused on Alice's laughter and the joy they had shared. The meadow around them shimmered with life, and the shadows receded slightly. But the darkness was relentless. From the depths of the shadow, a figure emerged, tall and foreboding, cloaked in black mist. Its eyes glowed with malevolence, piercing through the haze of light. "You dare trespass in my domain," the figure growled, its voice like gravel crunching underfoot. Emily's heart raced, fear clawing at her throat. "We have to go," she cried. But Alice remained rooted to the spot, fear flashing across her features. "Don't look at him," Alice warned. "He feeds on fear. Focus on the light." The figure advanced, its form shifting and twisting as it reached for them. "You cannot escape, little girl," it hissed, its voice slithering through the air. "You are bound to this darkness." As the shadows lunged toward her, Emily pressed the locket to her heart once more, her mind racing. "Alice, help me!" she shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Remember me!" Alice cried, the warmth of her presence intensifying as the shadows writhed around them. "Remember the joy, the laughter, and the love." In that moment, a surge of memories flooded Emily's mind. Childhood laughter, sunlit days spent playing in the park, the warmth of family gatherings. She focused on those memories, channeling all the love and happiness she could muster. The locket began to glow, radiating light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. With a blinding flash, the light expanded, illuminating the meadow and casting away the shadows. The figure recoiled, its dark form shrinking back into the depths from which it came. "You will regret this," it screamed, fading into the void. Emily felt the warmth of the sun envelop her, the meadow shimmering with vibrant colors once more. She turned to Alice, who smiled with gratitude and relief. "You did it! You helped me remember!" But as the joy filled the air, Emily felt the ground beneath her tremble. "We need to go," she urged, glancing nervously around. "The darkness will return." Alice nodded, and together they raced through the meadow, laughter echoing in their wake. The locket pulsed with energy, guiding them toward the edge of the memory. But just as they reached the boundary, Emily hesitated, a feeling of dread washing over her. "Will you be okay?" she asked, glancing back at Alice. "Will you remember now?" "I will," Alice assured her, a bright smile on her face. "But you must promise to help others too. You have a gift, Emily. Use it wisely." "I promise," Emily replied, her heart swelling with determination. With one last look at the sunlit meadow, she reached out and touched the boundary of the memory. A blinding light enveloped her, and in an instant, she was back in her bedroom, the locket still warm in her hand. But as the brightness faded, a cold chill swept through the room, and she felt the weight of the shadows returning. The comforting glow of the memory lingered in her mind, but the air was thick with foreboding. Emily looked around, heart racing. "Alice!" she called out, hoping for a response. But the room remained silent, the shadows creeping in around her like hungry spectres. Just then, she heard it. A low, guttural growl reverberating from the darkness, a reminder that the battle was far from over. The dark spirit had not been defeated. It was merely waiting for its next opportunity. The shadows swirled around her, and she felt a sudden rush of fear. "I need to get out of here," she thought frantically, scrambling to her feet. But as she moved toward the door, the shadows lunged forward, wrapping around her limbs like icy chains. "You cannot escape!" they hissed, a chorus of voices that sent terror racing through her veins. Emily clutched the locket, the warmth pulsing against her skin. "I can't let them take me!" she thought fiercely. With a surge of determination, she concentrated on the memories of Alice, the joy, the laughter, the bond they had forged. "I will not be afraid," she shouted, channeling her energy into the locket. As she did, the shadows recoiled, shrieking in fury. The light from the locket glowed brighter, illuminating the room and pushing back the encroaching darkness. Emily could feel the power surging through her, a force of light that defied the shadows. But the darkness would not relent. It twisted and writhed, taking on monstrous shapes as it lunged toward her again. "You cannot win!" it snarled, the air thick with its malevolence. "No!" Emily shouted, pushing forward. "I am not afraid of you!" With one final burst of energy, she shattered the darkness with the brilliance of the locket, the light exploding outward and filling the room with warmth and hope. The shadows screamed, retreating into the corners of the room, dissolving like mist under the sun. Emily stood tall, heart racing, feeling the weight of the darkness lift from her shoulders. The battle was won, for now. But she knew the darkness would return, and Alice's warning echoed in her mind. The fight against the unseen was far from over. As she took a deep breath, Emily realized she had only just begun to understand the depths of her gift and the challenges that lay ahead. With renewed determination, she clutched the locket tightly, ready to embrace the darkness and the light that coexisted within her. The journey had just begun, and she was prepared to face whatever came next, knowing she wasn't alone in this fight. Alice would be with her, and together, they would find a way to bring peace to the restless spirits that haunted the night. Chapter 3. The tension grows. In the days that followed her encounter with Alice, Emily felt a palpable shift in her world. The locket now hung from her neck, a constant reminder of the ghostly girl who had reached out for help. It felt warm against her skin, pulsing like a heartbeat, a source of both comfort and dread. Each night, she anxiously awaited the return of Alice, hoping to hear her voice again, to explore the memories contained within the locket. But with each passing day, the darkness that lingered in her home grew heavier, pressing down on her spirit like a storm cloud threatening to burst. Emily's father had become increasingly distant and volatile, his mood swings like the unpredictable weather outside. One moment, he would be gruff and dismissive, barking orders as though she were an intruder in her own home. The next, he would withdraw into himself, lost in the shadows of his own mind. The weight of his disapproval hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Emily felt the growing distance between them, a chasm that seemed to deepen with every passing moment. She tried to reach out, to explain the strange occurrences that plagued her, but every attempt was met with anger and disbelief. "Stop with your nonsense, Emily," he snapped one evening, slamming a stack of papers on the kitchen table, scattering crumbs like confetti. "There are no such things as ghosts. You're just letting your imagination run wild." "But Dad, Enough," he roared, his voice echoing through the dimly lit room. "You need to focus on reality, not whatever fantasies you've conjured up in that head of yours." That night, as Emily lay in bed, the silence in the house felt deafening. The shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into shapes that felt alive, and Emily could almost hear them whispering her name, beckoning her into their dark embrace. She clutched the locket tightly, the warmth a comfort against the chill that seeped into her bones. "Please come back, Alice," she whispered into the darkness, longing for the ghostly girl's presence. "I need you." But as the hours crept by, the silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. No whispers, no flickering lights, only the sound of her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. Just as she was about to drift off to sleep, the shadows in her room began to stir. The air grew cold, and she felt a familiar presence surrounding her, like a shroud of mist settling over her. "Emily." A soft voice floated through the darkness, warm and inviting. "Lily!" Emily gasped, bolting upright, hoping to see the gentle spirit she had grown to love. "No, it's me, Alice." The voice was closer now, filling the room with a sense of urgency. The shadows coalesced into the faint outline of the ghostly girl, her form shimmering in the moonlight. "Alice!" Emily cried, relief flooding through her. "You came back!" "I need your help," Alice urged, her voice tinged with anxiety. "The darkness is growing stronger and it's been watching you. You have to be careful." Emily felt her heart race, fear creeping in like a cold wind. "What do you mean? What darkness?" "The malevolent spirit that haunts me," Alice explained, her eyes wide with fear. "It wants to keep me trapped in this world, feeding off the pain and sadness I left behind. It knows you found the locket, and it's coming for you." "What do I do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "You must confront it. You have a gift, Emily, a connection to both the living and the dead, but you have to use it wisely," Alice advised, her tone grave. "You have to protect yourself and learn how to wield the light against the shadows." "I'm scared," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it's too powerful?" Alice stepped closer, the air around her shimmering with energy. "You are stronger than you realize. The light within you can push back the darkness. Trust in that strength. I will be with you." With a sudden rush of determination, Emily nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll confront the darkness." Alice smiled, a flicker of hope crossing her features. "Remember, the shadows may whisper lies, but you must hold on to your truth. Use the locket to help you see what's real and what's not." As Alice began to fade, Emily felt a surge of energy course through her, a warmth spreading from the locket that filled her with courage. "I won't let you down," she promised, clutching the locket tightly as the last traces of Alice disappeared. The following days were filled with a mix of trepidation and resolve. Emily spent every spare moment practicing, focusing on her connection to the spirits. She could feel the shadows closing in, a constant reminder of the darkness that loomed, but she also felt the flickering light within her, urging her to fight back. However, as the tension escalated at home, so did her father's anger. The air crackled with hostility, and Emily found herself tiptoeing around him, trying to avoid triggering his rage. One night, after he returned from work, the house felt especially heavy with his simmering frustration. "What's wrong with you, Emily?" he snapped, glaring at her as she sat at the kitchen table, doodling in her notebook. "Why can't you just act normal for once?" "I'm trying," she replied softly, attempting to keep her voice steady despite the hurt that pooled in her chest. I feel things sometimes." He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. You need to stop with this nonsense about feelings. There's no such thing as ghosts, and you should know better than to entertain those fantasies. Tears stung her eyes and she clenched her fists to keep from crying. But I can see them, Dad. I can talk to them. That's enough, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The force of the blow shook the dishes, and Emily flinched, fear and anger colliding within her. You're going to get yourself into trouble. I won't have any of it in my house. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and Emily felt the walls closing in around her. She stood abruptly, her heart racing. I just want to be understood, she cried, her voice breaking. I want to help. Help, he spat, disbelief flashing across his face. You think you're special? You're just a little girl playing pretend. Grow up. Stung by his words, Emily turned on her heel and fled to her room, slamming the door behind her. The tears she had fought back now flowed freely, and she buried her face in her pillow, wishing she could disappear. The shadows in her room seemed to thicken, twisting and curling around her like serpents, suffocating her with their weight. But then, as if sensing her despair, the locket around her neck began to warm, pulsing gently against her skin. The warmth spread through her, chasing away the chill that had settled in her bones. Alice, she whispered, longing for her friend's comforting presence. Just then, a faint glow filled the room, illuminating the corners and casting the shadows into retreat. Alice materialized before her, shimmering like a reflection in a still pond. Emily, she said softly, her voice like a balm on Emily's wounded heart. I'm here. I can't take this anymore. Emily cried, her voice muffled in her pillow. My father doesn't understand me. He just sees me as a burden. Sometimes, those we love can be the hardest to reach, Alice replied gently, floating closer. But remember, his fears are not your own. You have a gift, Emily, one that can help you both. But he doesn't believe in what I can do, Emily protested, frustration bubbling to the surface. He thinks I'm crazy. Then show him, Alice urged, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. Help him see the truth. You have the power to bridge the gap between your worlds. Emily took a deep breath, Alice's words igniting a spark of hope within her. How? She asked, desperation tinging her voice. How can I make him understand? Be brave, Alice replied, her voice firm yet soothing. You must confront the darkness together. Invite him to see what you see, to feel what you feel. The locket will guide you. As the shadows in the room began to creep back, Emily felt a sudden rush of determination. You're right. I won't give up on him. I will show him the truth. Alice's expression softened. Remember, you're not alone in this fight. I will always be with you. With that, Alice faded into the shadows, leaving Emily filled with renewed purpose. She sat up, wiping away her tears, and looked at the locket hanging around her neck. It pulsed with warmth, as if urging her to take action. The next day, Emily approached her father with a plan. She would invite him to join her in her world, to see the spirits that had filled her life with wonder and friendship. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the floor, she found him sitting in his armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring blankly at the wall. Dad, she said softly, her heart racing. Can we talk? He turned to her, irritation flashing in his eyes. What now, Emily? Can you come outside with me? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I want to show you something important. He huffed, his brow furrowing. I don't have time for your childish games. It's not a game, she insisted, desperation creeping into her tone. Please, just trust me for once. For a moment, he studied her, his expression hardening. But then, to her surprise, he sighed and set his glass down. Fine. Let's get this over with. Heart pounding, Emily led him outside into the backyard, the evening air thick with anticipation. The sun was just setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and the shadows stretched ominously across the grass. She could feel the locket pulsing against her chest, sensing the energy of the approaching darkness. "Now what?" her father asked, crossing his arms, skepticism etched across his face. "Just wait," she replied, trying to calm her nerves. "You have to be open to it." As the shadows deepened, Emily closed her eyes and focused on the warmth of the locket. "Alice, please come," she whispered, channeling her energy into the air around her. The night grew silent, the world around her holding its breath. Emily opened her eyes just as a gentle breeze swept through the yard, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. A soft glow appeared, illuminating the space before her, and there, in the shimmering light, was Alice. "Emily!" Alice called, her voice bright and full of life. "You did it!" Emily's heart swelled with pride as she turned to her father, who stood frozen in shock, eyes wide as he took in the sight before him. The ethereal glow surrounding Alice cast an enchanting light, and for a moment, all seemed possible. Who is that?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "This is Alice," Emily said, her voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "She's my friend, a ghost. I can talk to her, and she needs our help." For a moment, disbelief flickered across her father's face. But then it twisted into something darker, a mix of anger and fear. "This isn't real, Emily," he shouted, stepping back, the shadows stretching toward him as if eager to claim his fear. "You're just imagining things." "No, Dad, please," Emily pleaded, her heart racing as she saw the shadows gather, drawn to his panic. "It is real. You have to believe me." "Get inside," he ordered, voice shaking with rage. "You're scaring me." But before he could turn away, Alice stepped forward, her presence calm and soothing. "Please, sir," she said, her voice echoing with an otherworldly quality. "I mean no harm. I need your help to find peace." He recoiled, terror etched across his face. "You're not real. This is all in her head." Emily felt the ground tremble beneath her, the air thickening with darkness. "No!" she shouted, desperation flooding her veins. "You have to believe. The darkness is coming." Just then, the shadows surged, swirling around them like a tempest. A low growl filled the air, the malevolent presence returning, drawn to the fear radiating from her father. Emily felt a chill grip her heart, panic rising within her. "Alice, what do we do?" "Stay strong, Emily," Alice urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Focus on the light. Remember the joy." With tears streaming down her face, Emily took a deep breath and reached for the locket, pressing it to her heart. "I won't let you take him," she shouted into the darkness, feeling the warmth surge through her. The light erupted from the locket, pushing back the shadows that swarmed around them. The growls turned into shrieks of rage as the darkness recoiled from the brilliance, and Emily's father staggered back, eyes wide with fear. "Emily!" he shouted, his voice trembling. "What is happening?" "I'm fighting for you," she yelled, heart pounding as she summoned all her strength. "You have to believe." In that moment, the air shifted, the shadows shrinking back as the light enveloped them. The ghostly figure of Alice stood beside her, radiating warmth and hope. Together, they pushed back against the encroaching darkness, forcing it to retreat. The growling faded, replaced by a deafening silence. Emily's father stood frozen, mouth agape as the shadows dissolved into nothingness, leaving only the soft glow of the locket in the twilight. "Dad," Emily whispered, her heart racing as the tension in the air dissipated. "You saw it, didn't you?" He blinked, shaking his head as if waking from a nightmare. I don't know," he stammered, confusion etched on his face. "What just happened?" "I told you," Emily said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "There are spirits, and they need help. Alice needs our help." Slowly, he lowered his gaze to the ground, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps, or regret. "I was wrong, wasn't I?" he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Yes," Emily replied, tears stinging her eyes. "But it's not too late. We can help them together." He looked up, his eyes searching hers for understanding. What do we do? With a surge of hope, Emily held the locket up between them. We use this. We have to find a way to bring peace to the spirits, to help them move on. Alice smiled, her ghostly form shimmering in the fading light. Together, we can make a difference, she said, her voice filled with warmth. The tension that had once filled the air began to lift, replaced by a sense of unity. Emily's father stepped forward, determination igniting in his eyes. "Okay," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do this." As they stood together, Emily felt the warmth of the locket pulsing against her chest, a beacon of light guiding them through the darkness. The shadows may linger, but they would no longer be bound by fear. They had each other, and together they would face whatever came next. With Alice by their side, Emily felt the weight of the world lift, and she knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. A journey into the unknown, filled with challenges, fears, and the promise of discovery. The darkness may come, but they would stand strong against it, united by the light of hope. Chapter 4: The Ghostly Warning. As the days turned into weeks, Emily and her father tried to navigate their newfound connection to the spirit world, but the shadows that loomed over them remained relentless. Though her father had shown a flicker of belief after that harrowing night, he was still hesitant, often casting wary glances at the locket, as if it might sprout fangs and bite him. Emily sensed his internal struggle, the battle between fear and curiosity, and it only fueled her determination to prove that their lives could be enriched by the spirits instead of haunted by them. One evening, as dusk settled over their house, Emily sat at her desk, the locket gleaming under the dim light of her lamp. The shadows in her room stretched and contorted, and she could feel the whispers of the spirits around her, urging her to take action. She had spent countless nights trying to summon Alice, but the ghostly girl hadn't returned since that fateful night. It weighed on her like a stone in her heart. "Please, Alice," Emily whispered, clutching the locket. "I need your guidance." The air around her thickened, a chill creeping into her bones. Just as despair began to gnaw at her, a flicker of light erupted from the locket, casting a warm glow in the darkness. Suddenly, Emily felt a familiar presence, and Alice appeared before her, shimmering like a mirage. "Emily!" Alice exclaimed, her voice a blend of excitement and urgency. "I'm here. I've been waiting for you to call me." "Where have you been?" Emily asked, relief flooding through her. "I've missed you." "I've been gathering strength," Alice replied, her expression serious. "But there's something important we need to discuss. The darkness, it's getting stronger. I can feel it creeping closer to you." "What do you mean?" Emily's heart raced, a cold shiver running down her spine. "What kind of darkness?" "The malevolent spirit that haunts me," Alice explained, her eyes wide with fear. "It feeds on fear and sorrow, and it's drawn to your energy. It knows you're trying to help me, and it will stop at nothing to keep me from finding peace." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What can I do? I don't want to put you in danger." Alice moved closer, her presence a comforting warmth amidst the chill that enveloped the room. "You must be vigilant. This spirit is cunning. It can manipulate your fears and use them against you. You have to learn to distinguish between the voices of the spirits who need help and the darkness that seeks to deceive you." "Okay," Emily said, nodding, but doubt crept in. "But how?" "You must confront your own fears first," Alice said, her voice steady. "You have to face the shadows within you. Only then can you stand against the darkness that seeks to control you." "Face my fears?" Emily echoed, anxiety twisting in her stomach. "What if I can't?" "Trust in the light you possess," Alice urged. "Remember that love and courage can push back even the darkest shadows. We can do this together, but you must be prepared." With a deep breath, Emily steeled herself. "I'll try," she promised. "I'll face whatever comes." "Good," Alice said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "But be cautious. The darkness is always watching, waiting for you to falter." As Alice began to fade, Emily felt a mix of determination and fear wash over her. She knew she had to face the shadows within herself, but the thought of confronting her deepest fears made her stomach churn. She would need to prepare herself for whatever lay ahead. That night, as she lay in bed, the shadows crept closer, thickening in the corners of her room. Emily closed her eyes, willing herself to sleep. But sleep would not come. She felt the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing down, and she knew she had to confront it. She took a deep breath and whispered into the darkness, "I'm ready." As the clock struck midnight, the air shifted, growing colder. A low whisper echoed through the room, sending chills down her spine. "Emily!" She sat up, heart racing, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Who's there?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Emily, come play." The voice was soft and seductive, a tantalizing melody that wrapped around her like silk. She felt drawn to it, the way a moth is drawn to a flame. The shadows shifted, coalescing into a figure that flickered in and out of existence. "Emily," it called again, a grin spreading across its face, but there was something off about it, something sinister that made her gut twist. "I'm here to play with you." "Who are you?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "What do you want?" "I want to show you something. Something fun," the figure replied, its voice dripping with a mocking sweetness. "Why don't you come closer?" Emily shook her head, instinctively backing away. "No, stay away from me." "Why so scared?" the figure sneered, the shadows twisting around it like a cloak. "Don't you want to have some fun?" The atmosphere shifted, darkening as the figure began to step closer. Emily could feel the pull of its energy, a darkness that threatened to envelop her. She knew this was not Alice. This was the darkness Alice had warned her about. "I can show you things," it hissed, the voice echoing around her, warping into a cacophony of whispers. "I can show you what your father really thinks of you, what he's hiding. Wouldn't you like to know?" "No!" Emily cried, shaking her head violently. "Leave me alone!" But the figure merely laughed, a cruel, echoing sound that filled the room. "You're just a scared little girl, aren't you? Hiding in your little world, pretending everything is fine. But deep down, you know the truth. Your father doesn't love you. He wishes you were different." "Stop it!" Emily screamed, her heart pounding as she pressed her hands against her ears, trying to drown out the whispers. "You're lying." "Am I?" The figure leaned closer, its face inches from hers, eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask him why he really drinks? Why he spends so much time in his office avoiding you?" The words cut through her, and Emily felt her defenses waver. He's just stressed," she muttered, but uncertainty gnawed at her insides. "Stressed?" the figure mocked. "Or maybe he's afraid of what you might become, afraid of the spirits you talk to, afraid of you." The shadows surged around her, and Emily could feel the coldness seep into her skin. Panic clawed at her throat as the figure's words echoed in her mind. "I'm not afraid," she shouted, but her voice trembled. "Then face it," the figure hissed, its grin widening. "Face the truth." Suddenly, the darkness closed in around her, and the room began to spin. Emily felt herself falling, spiraling into a void where whispers taunted her, twisting her thoughts into knots. The shadows surrounded her, drowning her in despair. "Help!" she screamed, but the words were swallowed by the darkness. Just when she thought she might be lost forever, a warm light burst through the shadows, pushing them back. The familiar presence of Alice emerged, her form glowing with a radiant energy. "Emily, remember who you are," Alice called, her voice cutting through the chaos. With a surge of determination, Emily focused on the light within her, the warmth radiating from the locket. "I am not afraid," she shouted, clinging to Alice's voice as a lifeline. The shadow shrieked, the figure recoiling in anger. "You think you can defeat me?" it snarled, its form flickering in and out of existence. "I know I can," Emily yelled, feeling the light growing brighter within her. "You have no power over me." With that declaration, the light surged forth, engulfing her in warmth and strength. The darkness writhed, screeching as it was pushed back, the shadows dissipating like smoke in the wind. As the room returned to its familiar shape, Emily found herself back in her bed, the remnants of the nightmare fading like a distant echo. But the feeling of dread lingered, and she knew the darkness would return. With a shaky breath, she reached for the locket, holding it tightly in her palm. "I can't let it win," she whispered to herself, determination blooming in her chest. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but she knew the fight was far from over. The next day, she resolved to talk to her father. She needed to bridge the gap between them, to share her experiences and help him understand the world she inhabited. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, she found her father in the living room, sitting with a drink in hand, staring blankly at the television. "Dad," she began, her voice steady but laced with nervousness. "Can we talk?" He looked up, his expression guarded. "About what?" "About the spirits, and what happened the other night," she replied, taking a deep breath. "I think you need to know the truth." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Emily, we've talked about this. There's nothing to discuss." "But there is," she insisted, feeling the heat of frustration rising in her chest. "You don't understand what I've been experiencing. It's real, and I need you to believe me." He set his glass down, his patience thinning. "I don't have time for your childish fantasies, Emily. Ghosts are not real. You're just seeing things." "They are real!" Emily shouted, her voice breaking. "I've seen them. I've talked to them. And Alice, she's a ghost, and she needs our help." He stood up, anger boiling to the surface. "This nonsense is going to ruin you, Emily. You're going to end up just like your mother, lost in your head." The words hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment, all the air left her lungs. "What do you mean?" she gasped, trying to process the implication. "She was always off in her own world," he spat, frustration leaking into his voice. "I won't have you end up like her." Tears blurred Emily's vision as hurt and anger collided within her. "I'm not like her. I'm trying to connect with you, but you keep pushing me away." But before he could respond, the room grew cold, and the shadows began to creep in, curling around them like dark vines. The temperature plummeted, and Emily felt the unmistakable presence of the darkness returning, drawn to their conflict. "No," she whispered, panic rising in her throat as the figure began to materialize again, looming over them like a storm cloud. "Emily," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You should be afraid. The darkness will consume you both." "Leave us alone," Emily shouted, gripping the locket tightly. The warmth surged through her again, a beacon against the encroaching shadows. "Foolish child," the figure sneered, its form shifting menacingly. "You think you can protect him. You're just a scared little girl." "Stop it," Emily cried, stepping protectively in front of her father. "I won't let you take him." The darkness lunged forward, reaching for her father, who stumbled back in fear. "What is happening?" he yelled, panic rising in his voice. "I won't let you hurt him," Emily shouted, channeling all her strength into the locket. "Alice, help me." The warmth of the locket enveloped her, and the light surged forth, illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows. "Together!" she called out, her voice strong and defiant. The darkness shrieked in fury as the light grew brighter, illuminating every corner of the room. "You can't fight me!" it roared, its form writhing in agony. "Yes, we can!" Emily shouted, her heart racing as she felt the power of the spirits behind her, urging her on. With one final burst of energy, she directed the light toward the figure, and it shrieked, retreating into the shadows as the brightness engulfed it. "This isn't over!" it screamed, fading into nothingness. As the light faded, Emily turned to her father, who stood frozen, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. "Dad," she said softly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Are you okay?" He blinked, the color draining from his face. I don't understand," he stammered, shaking his head. "You saw it, didn't you?" Emily pressed, her voice trembling. "The darkness. It's real." "I don't know what I saw," he admitted, confusion mingling with fear. But if what you say is true, what does that mean for us?" Emily took a deep breath, her heart swelling with hope. It means we can fight back. We can help the spirits who need it, and we can protect ourselves from the darkness. For the first time, she saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "You're serious about this," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You really believe there are spirits, and that they need help?" "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "I can help them, but I need you to believe in me." He looked at her, the walls of skepticism crumbling as the reality of their situation settled in. "What do we do?" he asked, his tone softening. Emily felt a surge of relief and determination. "We need to learn how to navigate this world together. We have to understand the spirits and their needs. We can use the locket to guide us." As they stood together, the tension that had once filled the air began to lift, replaced by a shared purpose. Emily could feel the warmth of the locket pulsing against her chest, a beacon of hope amidst the lingering shadows. The darkness may not be defeated, but together, they would face whatever lay ahead. The bond between them was stronger than the fear that had once threatened to tear them apart. With Alice by their side, they would learn to confront the unknown, united against the forces that sought to keep them in the dark. And as the night settled in around them, Emily knew this was just the beginning. The journey would be fraught with challenges, but with courage and determination, they would uncover the truth that lay hidden in the shadows. Chapter 5. The Reflection's Voice. The air in Emily's room was thick with tension, heavy with the anticipation of something dark and unknown lurking just beyond her reach. The flickering candlelight cast ominous shadows that danced along the walls, and she could feel the familiar unease creeping back into her bones. The confrontation with the darkness had left her shaken, yet it also ignited a fire within her, a determination to uncover the truth behind the shadows that threatened to consume her family. As night fell, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending chills down her spine. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, the locket resting in her palms, its warmth a comfort against the coldness of the room. She had been reading through the notes she and her father had compiled, searching for any clue that might help them face the malevolent spirit that seemed intent on driving them apart. Just then, a faint whisper brushed against her ear, barely audible over the howling wind. "Emily!" Her heart raced as she whipped her head around, scanning the room for any sign of movement. The shadows flickered, but there was nothing. "Alice," she called softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is that you?" The whisper came again, this time clearer, echoing through the stillness. "Emily, help me." A shiver ran down her spine, and she felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to connect with the spirit who had become her friend. "I'm here," she exclaimed, gripping the locket tightly. "What do you need?" Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, the air becoming heavy and oppressive. The shadows in the corners of the room began to swirl and coalesce, forming a figure cloaked in darkness. Emily felt a surge of fear, but she held her ground, reminding herself of the light she carried within her. "Don't be afraid," the figure said, its voice soft yet hauntingly distorted. "I've come to show you the truth." "Who are you?" Emily demanded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "You're not Alice." The figure stepped closer, its form shifting in and out of focus, as if it were made of smoke and shadows. "I am what you fear, what you deny. I am the darkness that lives inside you." "No," she replied, shaking her head. "I won't let you take me. I won't be afraid." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills racing down her spine. "You think you can escape me? I am a part of you, Emily. I feed on your fears, your insecurities. You cannot deny me forever." As the figure drew closer, Emily felt the shadows closing in around her, squeezing the breath from her lungs. "Get away!" she screamed, feeling a wave of desperation wash over her. "I won't let you control me." "Control," it mocked, voice laced with venom. "You think you're in control? Look around you. Your father fears you. He thinks you're just like her." The words struck like a knife, and Emily's heart sank as the figure's insinuation twisted in her mind. "No!" she cried, tears springing to her eyes. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" the figure taunted, its voice echoing in her mind. You are just like your mother, lost in your own world, speaking to ghosts. He resents you for it. He's afraid of what you might become. No, Emily shouted, gripping the locket as if it could shield her from the truth she feared. He loves me. I know he does. The shadows began to thrum with energy, swirling around her as the figure pressed closer. You cannot hide from your reality, Emily. You will never be enough for him. You're a burden, a curse. With each word, the shadows around her grew denser, threatening to consume her. Stop it! She screamed, pressing her hands against her ears, trying to drown out the sinister voice that filled her mind with doubt and despair. Do you really think you can block me out? It hissed, the voice morphing into a cacophony of whispers that echoed around her. You will always be alone in the dark. Not alone! Emily shouted defiantly, channeling the warmth of the locket as a shield against the encroaching darkness. I have Alice. I have my father. You can't take them from me. Suddenly the figure lunged forward, the shadows enveloping her, and Emily felt herself being pulled into a void, a cold darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. You belong to me, it shrieked, the sound reverberating through her very bones. In that moment of desperation, Emily closed her eyes and concentrated on the warmth of the locket, summoning the light within her. Alice, I need you, she cried, her voice piercing through the suffocating darkness. With a sudden burst of light, Alice appeared beside her, radiant and fierce, her presence pushing back against the shadows. Emily, she exclaimed, reaching for her. Focus on the light. You are stronger than this. The figure screeched in fury, the shadows recoiling from Alice's light. You think you can protect her? It spat, its voice filled with rage. She is mine. No, Emily yelled, drawing strength from Alice's presence. I will not be yours. The warmth of the locket surged within her, and with a final push, she directed the light toward the figure, illuminating the darkness that threatened to consume her. I am not afraid, she shouted, the light radiating outward, engulfing the shadows. With a blinding flash, the figure howled in anguish, the shadows disintegrating under the brilliance of Emily's light. You cannot escape me forever, it screamed, fading into nothingness as the shadows receded, leaving only the soft glow of Alice beside her. As the light settled, Emily felt her body trembling with adrenaline and fear. Are you okay? Alice asked, concern etched on her ethereal face. I think so, Emily gasped, her heart racing. But it was so convincing. I thought it was telling the truth. Those are the lies of the darkness, Alice replied gently, floating closer. It feeds on your fears and insecurities. You must learn to differentiate between the truth and the shadows. Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. I thought I could handle it, but it was stronger than I expected. You are stronger than you know, Alice assured her, her glow radiating warmth. But you must face your fears, not just the external ones, but the ones within you. The darkness thrives on your doubts, and you must confront them. With a newfound sense of determination, Emily nodded. I will. I'll confront my fears. I won't let it control me. Alice smiled, the light around her intensifying. Remember, Emily, you are never alone. Call on me when you need guidance, and I will be there. As Alice faded into the soft glow of the night, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose swelling within her. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, but she knew this was just the beginning. The battle against the shadows would continue, and she had to prepare herself for the challenges ahead. That night, as she lay in bed, the locket pulsing gently against her heart, Emily resolved to confront the shadows within her. She would talk to her father, open up about her fears and insecurities, and they would face the darkness together. In the days that followed, Emily sought moments to connect with her father, to share the struggles she had faced and the weight of the darkness that threatened to tear them apart. They began to talk more openly about their fears, creating a bridge of understanding that had been missing for far too long. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Emily took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Dad, she began, her voice steady. Can we talk about what happened? About the darkness? He looked up, concern etched on his face. Is it still bothering you? He asked. his voice laced with worry. It is, she admitted, her heart racing. But I need you to understand. It's not just about me. It's about us. The darkness feeds on our fears, and we have to face it together. He frowned, furrowing his brow as he contemplated her words. What do you mean? I saw a figure, and it told me things. It tried to manipulate me by preying on my insecurities, Emily explained, her voice trembling with emotion. It said you were afraid of me, that you didn't want me to be like Mum. Her father's expression shifted, a flicker of pain crossing his face. Emily, I didn't mean to. I know, she interrupted, her heart aching for him. I know you're struggling, but we can't let the darkness divide us. We have to confront it together. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. You're right. I've been lost in my own fears, and I didn't see how it was affecting you. I'm sorry. As they sat together, the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, but Emily felt a warmth enveloping them, a protective shield against the darkness. We can face this together, Dad. I won't let it control us. With each passing day, they grew stronger together, learning to recognize the whispers of the darkness and confront them head-on. Emily felt the bond between them deepen, fortified by their shared struggles and determination to stand against the shadows that sought to tear them apart. But even as they fought back against the darkness, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it was merely lying in wait, biding its time until they were most vulnerable. She knew that the battle was far from over, and she had to remain vigilant. As night fell once more, Emily lay in bed, feeling the locket pulsing softly against her heart. The shadows outside danced in the moonlight, but she felt a sense of peace knowing that she was not alone. She would confront whatever darkness came her way, and with her father by her side, she would fight to reclaim their lives from the shadows that threatened to consume them. And as she drifted off to sleep, she whispered into the darkness, I am not afraid. Chapter 6. The Shadow in the Real World. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across Emily's room. But despite the brightness of the day, a heavy cloud hung over her, shrouding her thoughts in a veil of darkness. The previous night's confrontation with the malevolent spirit lingered in her mind, a haunting reminder of the struggle that awaited them. After their conversation, Emily felt a flicker of hope. She had opened up to her father, but deep down, she feared that the darkness still lurked nearby, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the world around her was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. As she went about her day, Emily found it hard to focus. Each creak of the house seemed amplified, each shadow a reminder of the unseen threat that loomed over them. The memories of the figure that had tormented her resurfaced, its chilling laughter echoing in her ears. The way it had twisted her insecurities into weapons against her. She shivered at the thought. Emily, are you coming? Her father called from the kitchen, breaking her from her reverie. Yeah, just a second, she replied, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. She joined him for breakfast, trying to ignore the unease that settled in her stomach. As they ate, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken fears. Emily glanced at her father, who looked worn and distant, his eyes shadowed by the weight of their recent experiences. She wanted to reach out, to assure him that they were in this together, but the words caught in her throat. Emily, he finally said, breaking the silence. I know things have been difficult lately, with everything happening. Yeah, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, but we can get through this. We just need to stick together. He nodded, but Emily could see the worry etched on his face. I know. I'm trying, but it's hard to shake this feeling that something is watching us. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled at his words. She glanced toward the window, where the sunlight struggled to penetrate the heavy shadows lurking in the corners of the room. We have to be careful, she said. The darkness feeds on fear. We can't let it see us doubt ourselves. Her father's gaze fell to the table, and she could sense the weight of his thoughts. What if it comes for you again? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. What if it tries to manipulate you? A chill ran through her. It won't, she insisted, trying to sound braver than she felt. I have the light with me. We both do. We can't let it control us. After breakfast, Emily decided to take a walk outside, hoping that the fresh air would clear her mind. The late autumn chill brushed against her skin, but it was refreshing, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the house. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her, a lingering shadow lurking just out of sight. She made her way to a nearby park, the trees standing tall and bare against the sky. The branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and as she wandered deeper into the park, she felt the shadows thickening around her. Each gust of wind carried with it a whisper, a soft murmur that seemed to call her name. Emily! The voice drifted on the breeze, tantalizing yet threatening. Her heart raced as she turned in circles, searching for the source. Who's there? She called, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. The air was heavy, charged with a malevolence that made her skin crawl. You know who I am, the voice purred, slithering through the air like smoke. You can't escape me, Emily. No, she shouted, clutching the locket tightly as warmth surged through her. I won't let you in. You're not real. The shadows twisted and curled around her, thickening until they formed a figure, its features obscured and indistinct. Oh, but I am very real, it hissed, drawing closer, the air growing colder with each passing moment. I am the truth you fear, the darkness that dwells in your heart. Emily felt the walls closing in, panic rising in her chest. I know what you are, she screamed, stepping back as the figure loomed over her. You're a liar. Am I? The figure mocked, its voice dripping with disdain. You think you can deny your own darkness? You are just a scared little girl, lost in a world that doesn't understand you. With a surge of defiance, Emily pressed the locket against her heart. You don't scare me, she shouted, channeling the light within her. You will not take me. The figure recoiled slightly, shadows writhing as the light pushed against it. You cannot fight what is part of you, it snarled. You will always be trapped in the darkness. Just as it lunged forward, she felt a sudden rush of energy as Alice appeared beside her, glowing brightly. Emily, focus on the light, Alice shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The warmth of the locket surged through her, and Emily took a deep breath, channeling all her strength into the light. You are nothing, she declared, the light illuminating the dark figure. I will not let you win. The figure shrieked in rage, shadows flickering and dissolving under the brilliance of the light. You cannot escape me, it screamed, its form twisting and writhing in agony. With a final burst of energy, Emily directed the light toward the figure, and it howled as it was engulfed, disappearing into the air like smoke in the wind. As the echoes of its cries faded, Emily stood panting, the adrenaline coursing through her. I did it, she breathed, looking around the now empty park. You are stronger than you think, Alice said, her presence a comforting balm. But remember, the darkness will continue to test you. You must remain vigilant. I will, Emily promised, a renewed sense of determination filling her heart. But I can't do this alone. Never forget that you have allies, Alice replied, her ethereal glow illuminating the area around them. The light within you is powerful, but it is your connections to those you love that will guide you through the darkness. As they walked back toward home, Emily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could conquer the shadows together after all. But just as they approached the edge of the park, the atmosphere shifted, and a chilling sensation swept over her. Emily, a voice whispered, soft yet insidious, echoing from the shadows that clung to the trees. You think you've won, don't you? Her heart sank as she turned to look, but the figure was gone, leaving only the rustling leaves behind. I won't let you manipulate me, she shouted into the void, fear coiling in her stomach. We will see, the voice replied, fading into the distance. The darkness is patient. It will wait for the moment you are weakest. When she returned home, Emily found her father sitting in the living room, a blank expression on his face as he stared at the television. The flickering images cast ghostly shadows across his features, and she could see the weight of worry etched into his brow. Dad, she said softly, taking a seat beside him. We need to talk about what's happening. It's not just me. It's affecting you too. He looked at her, eyes flickering with uncertainty. I don't want to talk about it, Emily. I'm tired of all this nonsense. Dad, this isn't nonsense, she exclaimed, her voice rising with frustration. It's real. The darkness is trying to manipulate us, to drive us apart. We have to confront it together. I can't deal with this right now, he said, shaking his head. I have enough on my plate without adding ghosts and shadows to the mix. Please, she pleaded, reaching out to touch his arm. I need you to believe me. We have to face this together, or it will tear us apart. He sighed, rubbing his temples as if trying to stave off a headache. I know you're scared, Emily, but I don't want to see you consumed by this. It's not healthy. But ignoring it won't make it go away, she insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. I've seen it, Dad. The shadows are real, and they're watching us. If we don't confront them together, we're both going to lose. He looked at her, and for a moment, she could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. What do you want me to do? He asked, voice heavy with resignation. Help me, she urged, heart racing with hope. Let's try a protection ritual together. If we can strengthen our bond, maybe we can push the darkness away for good. He hesitated, clearly torn between skepticism and concern for her well-being. You really believe this will work? He finally asked. I do, Emily replied, her voice steady. I can feel the strength of our connection, and if we face this as a team, we can conquer the shadows that seek to divide us. With a deep sigh, her father nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. Emily felt a rush of relief wash over her. Thank you, Dad. We'll do this together. They spent the evening preparing for the ritual, gathering candles, salt and protective symbols to create a barrier against the darkness. As the sun set and the shadows grew long, Emily felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She hoped that this ritual would provide the protection they needed. As they lit the candles and arranged them in a circle, Emily's heart raced with anticipation. She could feel the energy in the room shift, thickening with the weight of the unseen. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and she could almost hear the whispers of the darkness growing louder. Are you ready? Her father asked, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. Yes, Emily replied, taking a deep breath. We have to focus on the light and our connection. We can do this. They joined hands in the center of the circle, the warmth of their connection providing a sense of comfort amidst the uncertainty. Spirits who dwell in light, we call upon you, Emily began, her voice steady and clear. We seek protection against the darkness that seeks to harm us. As she spoke, the candles flickered, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with energy. Emily closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth radiating from the locket, feeling it pulse in time with her heart. Together, we are strong, she continued, opening her eyes to meet her father's gaze. We will not be afraid. But just as they began to feel the warmth of the light enveloping them, the atmosphere shifted, and a cold wind blew through the room. The shadows thickened, creeping closer as a low growl echoed in the darkness. Fools! A voice snarled, the darkness coalescing into a familiar figure. You think you can protect yourselves? You are nothing! Emily's heart raced as she faced the figure, dread pooling in her stomach. We are not afraid of you, she shouted, clenching her hands around her father's. The figure laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the room. You think you're strong. You're just children playing at magic. With a surge of determination, Emily pressed the locket against her heart, feeling the warmth radiate through her body. We have the light, she yelled. You cannot take us. As the figure lunged forward, Emily and her father called upon the light, focusing all their energy into a brilliant glow that surged from the candles. The darkness recoiled, shrieking in rage as the light pushed back against it. No, you will not win, it howled, the shadows twisting and writhing as they fought against the radiance. We will not be consumed, Emily shouted, pouring her strength into the light. We are stronger together. With one final burst of energy, they directed the light toward the figure, and it screamed in agony as it was engulfed in brilliance. The shadows disintegrated, leaving only a faint echo of the darkness that had haunted them. As the glow faded and the room fell silent, Emily and her father stood in the center of the circle, breathless and shaken. "Did we do it?" her father asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "I think we did," Emily replied, her heart racing with adrenaline. But even as they reveled in their small victory, Emily felt the shadows lingering just beyond the edges of her vision, waiting for another opportunity to strike. The darkness was not vanquished, it would return, and they had to remain vigilant. As they extinguished the candles and cleaned up the remnants of the ritual, Emily knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they had faced the shadows and emerged stronger, but the darkness still loomed, a constant reminder of the unseen threats that lingered just out of reach. That night, as Emily lay in bed, the locket pulsing softly against her heart, she vowed to remain vigilant. She would prepare for the battles ahead, and with her father by her side, she would confront whatever darkness awaited them, determined to reclaim their lives from the shadows that sought to tear them apart. Chapter 7. The Reflections' Demands. The days passed in a tense calm, an uneasy truce between Emily and the darkness that hovered just beyond their perception. After their ritual, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere of the house. The shadows felt less oppressive, but Emily knew better than to let her guard down. Each night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world was swallowed by darkness, she could feel the encroaching dread that settled in her chest, whispering promises of despair. With her father's newfound willingness to confront the supernatural, they had become a united front against the darkness. They spent countless hours researching protective symbols, rituals, and the nature of the spirits that lingered in the world around them. But even as they fortified their defenses, Emily felt the weight of an unseen presence, lurking in the corners of her mind, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as they sat at the dining room table, a book spread open before them, Emily noticed her father's brow furrowed with concern. "Emily," he began hesitantly, "do you think it's over? Do you think the darkness has really gone?" She hesitated, uncertainty coiling in her stomach. "I don't know, Dad. I want to believe it is, but I can still feel it watching us. It's like it's just biding its time." He sighed deeply, the weariness in his eyes betraying the toll this ordeal had taken on him. "I keep thinking about what it said during the ritual, about how we are just children playing at magic. What if it's right? What if we're not strong enough?" "No!" Emily shot back, determination surging through her. "We are strong. We've faced it together, and we can do it again. But we have to stay vigilant. We can't let fear control us." Her father nodded, but she could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. "Maybe we should consider bringing someone else into this, a medium, or someone who knows more about dealing with spirits." The suggestion hung heavy in the air, a chill creeping down Emily's spine. "But what if they're not trustworthy? What if they're just another way for the darkness to get to us?" Before her father could respond, the air around them shifted, a sudden chill that sent shivers racing down Emily's arms. The lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls, and she felt an eerie sensation of being watched. She glanced toward the hallway, her heart racing as she sensed the familiar presence lurking just beyond the veil of reality. "Emily," a voice whispered, soft and seductive, sliding through the air like a serpent. "Not now," she breathed, clenching her fists as panic rose within her. "You're not welcome here. Why do you resist?" the voice purred, a taunting lilt threading through its words. "You can't fight me, little girl. I am the truth that lies within you." "No!" she shouted, feeling the energy in the room shift dramatically. The shadows began to writhe, coalescing into a figure cloaked in darkness, its features obscured and indistinct. "Don't you want to know what your father truly thinks of you?" it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "What secrets lie buried beneath the surface?" "Leave him out of this," Emily cried, stepping protectively in front of her father, who looked startled by the sudden turn of events. "You're just trying to manipulate us." "Manipulate?" the figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the room. "I only reveal the truths you refuse to acknowledge. Your father fears you, Emily. He fears what you might become, just like your mother." "Shut up," Emily screamed, but doubt began to creep into her mind. "You're lying." The figure moved closer, its form swirling with shadows. "Am I? You know it's true. He thinks you're a burden, a curse. All he does is try to escape the darkness, but it's within him, just as it is within you." "Stop," her father shouted, but Emily could see the doubt flickering in his eyes, the fear that had haunted him since her mother's passing. The darkness thrived on that fear, feeding off the uncertainty that rippled through their lives. "I know the truth, Emily," the figure whispered, its voice a silken caress that sent chills down her spine. "You want to be seen, to be understood. But your father hides in the shadows, afraid of what you might reveal. You need to confront that fear." "Emily, don't listen," her father urged, desperation creeping into his voice. "This isn't real." "Isn't it?" the figure taunted, stepping closer. "You can't deny what's in your heart. You know the darkness is within you both." Suddenly the air shifted again, the temperature dropping sharply as the shadows surged toward them. Emily felt a rush of adrenaline, a primal instinct to protect her father. "I won't let you take him," she shouted, focusing on the warmth of her locket, summoning the light that had shielded her before. "Light?" the figure sneered, its form distorting as it pressed forward. "You think a little glow can save you from the inevitable? You are destined to fall into darkness." With a surge of determination, Emily raised the locket high above her head, channeling all her energy into a brilliant beam of light that pierced the shadows. "We will not be consumed," she screamed, the light erupting into a blinding brilliance. The figure howled in fury as the light enveloped it, the shadows twisting and writhing in agony. "You cannot escape!" it screeched, dissolving into wisps of darkness as the light pushed back against the encroaching shadows. "Together!" Emily cried, gripping her father's hand tightly. "We have to push it back." As they focused their energy into the light, the shadows began to retreat, howling in rage as the brilliance consumed them. "You may have won this battle, but I will return," the figure screamed, its voice fading into the ether. With one final burst of light, the figure disintegrated completely, leaving only a soft glow in the room. Emily and her father stood panting, their hearts racing with the adrenaline of the encounter. "Are you okay?" her father asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I think so," Emily replied, her breath shaky. "But it was right about one thing. We have to confront the truth together." As the remnants of the shadows faded away, the tension in the room began to lift, replaced by a sense of relief. But even as they stood victorious, Emily felt the lingering presence of the darkness, a reminder that the battle was far from over. "Emily," her father said, his voice steadying as he looked at her, "we need to talk about what just happened. This isn't just going to go away." "I know," she replied, her heart pounding, "but we can face it together. We just have to keep fighting." "Do you really believe that?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I do," she insisted, her voice firm. "We can't let the darkness tear us apart. We have to be stronger than our fears." That night, as Emily lay in bed, the locket pulsing softly against her chest, she resolved to confront whatever shadows awaited them. The darkness might be relentless, but she would not falter. She would fight for her family, for the truth that lay buried beneath the weight of fear and uncertainty. In the days that followed, they continued their research, searching for ways to combat the lingering presence of the darkness. Emily felt the shadows lurking just beyond their defenses, a constant reminder that the battle was not yet won. Each night, she would lie awake, listening to the soft whispers of the shadows that brushed against her mind, taunting her with the truth they claimed to possess. But despite the fear that gnawed at her, Emily remained resolute. She was determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the darkness and to protect her father from the insidious grasp of the shadows. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Emily felt a strange pull to the mirror in the hallway. The glass surface reflected the dim light, casting eerie shadows on the walls. There was something about it that felt different, almost alive, as if it were beckoning her closer. "Emily," her father called from down the hall. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," she admitted, stepping closer to the mirror. I just feel like something is drawing me in. Be careful, he warned, his voice tinged with concern. You don't know what might be waiting for you. But as she gazed into the mirror, she felt the warmth of the locket pulsing in her chest, urging her forward. I have to see, she whispered, feeling an inexplicable connection to the reflection. The surface of the glass rippled, and Emily felt herself being pulled closer, the darkness swirling around her like smoke. Emily, a voice whispered from the depths of the mirror, seductive and familiar. Come closer. Who are you? She breathed, mesmerized by the shifting shadows within. I am your truth, the voice purred, a haunting echo that sent chills racing down her spine. I can show you what lies beneath the surface. No, she shouted, pulling back as panic surged within her. You're not real. Are you sure? It taunted, its voice slithering through the air like a serpent. You want to know the truth about your father, don't you? What he hides from you. Get away from me, Emily cried, but the voice wrapped around her, filling her mind with doubt and uncertainty. He fears you, Emily, it whispered, a sinister undertone threading through its words. He fears what you might become, just like your mother. He thinks you're just like her, lost in your own world. With a surge of defiance, Emily pressed her hands against the mirror's surface, feeling the warmth of the locket pulsing against her skin. I won't let you manipulate me, she shouted, the light within her flaring to life. I am stronger than you. As the darkness began to writhe and twist within the mirror, the voice screamed in fury. You cannot escape me. I am your destiny. With one final burst of energy, she directed the light from the locket toward the mirror, illuminating the darkness within. I will not be consumed, she screamed, the brilliance engulfing the shadows. The figure within the mirror howled in rage as the light surged forward, consuming it entirely. The glass rippled, and Emily felt the weight of the darkness lift, leaving only her reflection staring back at her, wide-eyed and resolute. Breathing heavily, she stumbled back from the mirror, her heart racing with adrenaline. Emily? Her father called again, rushing to her side. What happened? I don't know, she gasped, shaking from the intensity of the encounter, but I felt it trying to pull me in. It was manipulating me. His expression darkened with concern. We need to be careful. It's getting bolder. We can't let it gain any more power over us. Emily nodded, determination swelling within her. We won't. I'm done letting it control me. We'll face it together. As they stood together, the shadows at the edges of the room seemed to retreat, if only for a moment. But deep down, Emily knew that the darkness would not be so easily defeated. It would return, more insidious than before, waiting for the moment when they were most vulnerable. That night, as she lay in bed, the locket pulsing softly against her heart, Emily resolved to remain vigilant. The battle against the shadows was far from over, and she would do everything in her power to protect her family from the darkness that threatened to consume them. Together, they would confront whatever awaited them, united against the unseen threat that lurked just beyond the edges of their reality. Chapter 8. Into the Abyss. The nights grew longer and darker, wrapping Emily and her father in an oppressive blanket of uncertainty. Each creak of the house seemed to echo louder in the silence, a constant reminder of the lurking shadows that prowled just beyond their reach. Despite their efforts to confront the darkness, Emily could feel its weight pressing down on them, suffocating and relentless, like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as a thick fog rolled in from the woods surrounding their home, Emily found herself drawn to the mirror in the hallway once more. The reflective surface had become a gateway of sorts, a portal through which the darkness had threatened to invade their lives. She had faced it before, but this time felt different, more ominous, more threatening. Emily, where are you going? Her father called from the living room, his voice laced with concern. I'm just looking at the mirror, she replied, a chill crawling up her spine as she approached the glass. Be careful, he warned, his voice carrying a weight of caution. You don't know what could be waiting for you on the other side. Ignoring the unease that fluttered in her stomach, Emily stood before the mirror, staring into the depths of her own reflection. The fog outside seemed to seep into the glass, swirling around her image like a misty veil. She felt a strange compulsion to touch it, to see what lay beyond the surface. As she reached out, the air grew cold, and a low hum filled the room, vibrating through her very bones. "Emily!" A voice whispered from within the mirror, soft and inviting, yet laced with a sinister undertone. "Come closer." Heart racing, she hesitated, but the pull was too strong. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "I am what you seek," it replied, the shadows coiling and twisting around its form. "I can show you the truth, the power that lies within you. You have the strength to conquer the darkness, if only you are willing to embrace it." The shadows shifted, dark tendrils reaching out toward her, and Emily felt a rush of both fear and curiosity. "I don't need your power," she declared, stepping back, her heart pounding. "I have my own light." "Your light is fragile, easily snuffed out," the voice taunted, its tone dripping with disdain. "Embrace the darkness, and you will find true strength. You cannot fight it forever." "No!" Emily shouted, shaking her head vigorously. "I won't give in to you." The figure within the mirror recoiled, shadows swirling in a frenzy. "You are weak, Emily. You don't know what you are capable of. Join me, and I can show you the truth of your family. I can reveal the secrets that lie buried in the dark." "Leave my family out of this," she yelled, feeling the warmth of her locket pulsing against her chest. "You will not manipulate me." "Manipulate?" it echoed, its laughter chilling her to the bone. "I am merely a reflection of what you already know. Your father fears you because he fears the truth about your mother." "Stop!" she screamed, the words slicing through the air. "You don't know anything about us." "Do I not?" it sneered, its form flickering as it pressed closer to the surface. "I can show you the moments he wishes to forget, the fear that grips his heart every time he looks at you. You are a constant reminder of his failure." Emily's breath caught in her throat as doubt began to seep into her mind. Was it true? Did her father really see her as a reminder of everything he had lost? A wave of sorrow crashed over her, and she clutched the locket tighter, trying to ward off the encroaching shadows. "Embrace your destiny, Emily," the figure urged, its voice a smooth whisper that wrapped around her. "You were meant to harness the darkness, to become more than what you are. Don't let the light blind you from your true potential." "No!" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage and defiance. "I am not like that. I will not let you take me." With a surge of determination, Emily stepped back from the mirror, her heart pounding. She would not succumb to the darkness. Not now, not ever. But as she turned to leave, the shadows surged forward, latching onto her arms, pulling her back toward the mirror with an unyielding grip. "You cannot run from what you are," it shrieked, the voice distorting into a cacophony of whispers. "Help!" she cried, panic surging as the shadows tightened around her. "Dad!" Suddenly, her father appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with fear. "Emily!" he shouted, rushing to her side. "What's happening?" "Get it off me!" she screamed, the shadows wrapping tighter around her, their cold tendrils clawing at her skin. He reached for her, grasping her arms and pulling her away from the mirror's grasp. "Hold on!" he yelled, his voice filled with urgency. "I'm here." As he yanked her free, the shadows recoiled, howling in fury. Emily felt the weight of the darkness lift as her father pulled her into a tight embrace. "What was that?" he asked, his breath coming in quick gasps. "I don't know," she replied, trembling as she tried to catch her breath. "It was trying to manipulate me. It said things about you and Mom." Her father's face paled, and she could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "What did it say?" "That you fear me," she admitted, the weight of the truth hanging heavily in the air. "That I remind you of Mom and what you lost." He stepped back, shock written across his features. "Emily, that's not true. I love you. You're nothing like her." "Then why do I feel this way?" she asked, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why do I feel like I'm losing you?" "Because the darkness is trying to exploit our fears," he said, his voice steadying as he looked deep into her eyes. "It's trying to drive a wedge between us, but we can't let it win." The mirror began to ripple once more, shadows swirling as if the darkness were regrouping. "It will come for you again," it hissed, the voice now a guttural growl. "You cannot escape your fate." "Shut up," Emily shouted, feeling the surge of defiance rise within her. "We are not afraid of you." With renewed courage, she pressed the locket against her heart, summoning the light that had once pushed back the shadows. "We will face you," she declared, her voice ringing clear. "We will not be consumed." The light flared brightly, illuminating the room and pushing back the encroaching darkness. The mirror began to tremble, the shadows shrieking in agony as the brilliance enveloped them. "No! You can't do this!" the voice roared, the figure flickering as it struggled against the light. "I will return!" With a final push, the light surged forth, engulfing the mirror and banishing the darkness back into the void. Emily and her father stood together, their hands clasped tightly as the shadows dissolved, leaving only silence in their wake. As the glow faded, Emily turned to her father, breathless and shaken. "Did we do it?" "I think so," he said, his voice filled with awe. "But it's not over. We have to be prepared for its return." "What if it comes for you?" she asked, fear creeping back into her heart. "What if it tries to manipulate you again?" Her father knelt down to her eye level, his expression earnest. "Emily, you have to trust in the strength of our bond. The darkness will always try to exploit our fears, but together we can fight back." She nodded, determination swelling within her. "I won't let it tear us apart. We'll face whatever comes next." As they stood together, Emily felt the weight of the darkness lift, if only for a moment. But deep down, she knew that the battle was far from over. The shadows would return, lurking just beyond the veil, waiting for another opportunity to strike. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she felt the familiar warmth of the locket pulsing against her chest. The shadows may come, but she would stand her ground, ready to face whatever darkness awaited them. She would not be consumed, and she would protect her father at all costs. Together, they would confront the abyss, united against the unseen threats that lurked just beyond the edges of their reality. With a newfound sense of purpose, Emily closed her eyes, whispering a silent vow into the darkness. "I am not afraid." Chapter 9. The Battle for Control. The air grew heavy in the dimly lit room, the oppressive atmosphere thick with the promise of confrontation. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by flickering candles that cast ghostly shadows on the walls. The woman, whom they had sought for guidance, had led them through a series of protective rituals. But as the last echoes of their incantations faded, a chilling silence settled over them, signaling the approach of the darkness they had been fighting for so long. "Do you feel that?" Emily whispered, her heart pounding in her chest as she glanced at her father, who sat across from her, eyes wide with apprehension. He nodded, his face pale and tense. "It's like a storm brewing just beyond the veil. We need to be ready." The woman, her expression grave, glanced around the room as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. "The darkness is relentless. It will try to exploit your fears, to weaken your resolve. You must hold firm against its temptations." Suddenly, the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into darkness before the candlelight returned with a vengeance. Emily felt a shiver race down her spine as she could hear whispers swirling around them, barely audible yet distinct, like a chilling wind carrying a message meant only for her. "Emily," the whispers echoed, their tones a blend of sweetness and venom. "Join us. Embrace the shadows. Together, we can be more than you ever imagined." "Get out!" she shouted, clenching her fists as she felt the shadows begin to encroach upon her. "I will not let you take me again." Her father's voice trembled as he spoke. "We can't give in. We must stay united." The whispers morphed into a cacophony of laughter, rising and falling like the tide, wrapping around them like a suffocating fog. "You think you are united?" the voice taunted, echoing through the room. "You think you can escape what you are? You are bound to darkness, just as she was." Emily's heart raced as she felt the shadows encircling her, the chilling presence pressing against her skin like icy fingers. "I am not like her," she screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. I won't become a prisoner of the shadows. The woman extended her hands, the candles flickering wildly in response. Focus on the light within you. Let it guide you. You are stronger than the darkness. With a deep breath, Emily felt the warmth of the locket pulsing against her chest, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching shadows. I will not be afraid, she cried, her voice ringing clear and strong. I choose the light. Suddenly, a surge of energy flooded through her, and she could feel the shadows begin to retreat, writhing against the force of her determination. No, you cannot resist, the voice howled, its fury rising like a tempest. You belong to the darkness. Never, Emily shouted, raising the locket high above her head as the light exploded from within, illuminating the room with a brilliant glow. The shadows shrieked, twisting and distorting in agony as the brilliance pushed them back. Her father stood beside her, his eyes shining with a fierce determination. Together, we are stronger, he shouted, reaching for her hand. We won't let it tear us apart. As their hands clasped, a wave of warmth surged through them, the bond between father and daughter amplifying the light that filled the room. We are light, Emily declared, feeling the shadows retreating, their cries growing fainter as the light consumed them. But the darkness would not be so easily vanquished. You think you can defeat me? It roared, its voice rising to a crescendo as it fought back against the light. You are nothing but children playing with forces beyond your understanding. With a furious roar, the shadows surged forward, lashing out like serpents, trying to wrap around Emily and her father. Stay close, she cried, their hands still clasped tightly as they focused on the warmth emanating from the locket. As the shadows lashed out, Emily felt the coldness pierce through the protective light, sending shockwaves of fear racing through her. Don't give in, her father urged, his grip tightening. We can't let it break our bond. The shadows twisted and turned, dark tendrils reaching out, trying to separate them. You are weak. You are nothing without the darkness, the voice screeched, the shadows pressing in closer, suffocating the light. No, Emily shouted, the warmth of the locket flaring even brighter as she focused on the love she felt for her father, the bond they shared, and the strength that came from their unity. We are not alone. With renewed determination, Emily poured her heart into the light, a dazzling beam that shot outwards, pushing back against the shadows. The darkness howled in frustration, thrashing violently as it was driven back, but it only grew more ferocious in its attempts to divide them. Do you think your love can save you? It taunted, voice dripping with malice. Love is a fleeting emotion. It will betray you when you need it most. We will never betray each other, Emily shouted defiantly, the light intensifying as her faith in their bond surged. We are stronger together! The shadows recoiled, the echoes of their anguished cries filling the air as they fought against the brilliance that surrounded Emily and her father. You think you can resist me? The voice shrieked, now more desperate than ever. You will suffer for this defiance. Suddenly the shadows swirled violently, a tempest of darkness that crashed against the light with a force that rattled the very foundation of the house. Emily and her father stumbled as the air became charged, crackling with energy that made the hair on their arms stand on end. Hold on! Her father yelled, pulling her closer as they fought against the tide of darkness that threatened to overwhelm them. We can do this! Together! Emily echoed, the light growing brighter as they focused on each other, drawing strength from their unwavering bond. We won't let it take us! With a final surge of power, they directed the light forward, creating a blinding explosion that pushed the shadows back, illuminating the room in a dazzling display. The darkness shrieked in terror, its form flickering and fading as the light consumed it. No! I will return! It howled, the voice dissolving into a chorus of anguished cries as the shadows vanished, leaving only the brilliance of the light in their wake. As the room fell silent, Emily and her father stood together, panting and trembling, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The warmth of the locket pulsed against her chest, a reminder of their victory, but even as they basked in the glow of the light, a nagging sense of unease lingered in the back of Emily's mind. Did we really win? She asked, her voice trembling slightly as she glanced around the now quiet room. Is it really gone? Her father sighed, the weight of concern heavy in his eyes. For now, yes. But we must remain vigilant. It will come back. It always does. We need to prepare ourselves for the next battle. Emily nodded, determination flooding her. We will be ready. We have to be. But even as they spoke, the air felt charged, as if the darkness were merely waiting for the right moment to strike again. Each flicker of the candlelight seemed to whisper warnings, the shadows lurking just out of sight, biding their time. In the days that followed, they continued their preparations, fortifying their defenses against the inevitable return of the darkness. Emily felt a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that each night brought the possibility of another confrontation. But amid the growing unease, she also felt the strength of their bond growing deeper, solidifying her resolve to face whatever darkness awaited them. They practiced rituals, researched protective symbols, and sought ways to strengthen their connection, aware that their love was their greatest weapon against the shadows. One night, as they sat together poring over books filled with ancient knowledge, Emily caught a glimpse of her father's tired eyes. "Dad," she said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. "You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together." He looked at her, a flicker of gratitude crossing his face. "I know. Sometimes I fear for you, Emily. I don't want to lose you like I lost her." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, and Emily felt a wave of empathy wash over her. "You won't lose me. We are stronger together, and I promise to fight alongside you, no matter what happens." Just then, the lights flickered ominously, and a cold wind swept through the room, sending chills racing down Emily's spine. "No," she whispered, fear clenching her heart. "Not again!" As the shadows began to creep back into the corners, she felt a familiar presence, an overwhelming sense of dread flooding her senses. "You thought you could banish me?" the voice hissed, echoing through the room. "You have only delayed the inevitable." Emily and her father stood together, hands clasped tightly, their bond a shield against the encroaching darkness. "We will fight you," she shouted, the light from the locket pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "We will not be afraid." Chapter 10. The Final Choice. The shadows surged forth, wrapping around Emily and her father like a suffocating shroud. The air grew thick with malevolence, the darkness pressing against them as if it were a living entity. "You think you can defeat me?" the voice sneered, an amalgamation of anguished whispers that sent shivers racing down Emily's spine. "You are merely children, unprepared for the true horrors that lie within." Emily clutched the locket tightly, feeling its warmth pulse against her skin. "We won't let you take us," she shouted defiantly, determination fueling her words. "We choose the light." Beside her, her father stood firm, his face set in a mask of resolve. "We will not be afraid," he added, his voice steady despite the darkness swirling around them. "We are stronger together." The shadows twisted and writhed, their movements resembling tortured souls, thrashing violently against the light that Emily and her father generated. "Together," the voice mocked, growing louder and more frantic. "You think your bond can save you? I will tear you apart, piece by piece." As the shadows lunged, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. She could see the darkness swirling like a storm ready to engulf them. But deep within, she felt a flicker of courage. "No!" she cried, focusing on the warmth of the locket. "We are united! You cannot break us!" With a sudden surge of energy, Emily raised the locket high above her head, and a brilliant beam of light erupted from its core, illuminating the room in a blinding glow. The shadows recoiled, hissing in pain as the light pierced through their dark forms, illuminating the truth hidden within. "Foolish girl!" the voice howled, thrashing against the light. "You cannot escape the darkness! It is part of you! I am not afraid of you!" Emily shouted back, her voice ringing with strength. "I know who I am. I will not let you control me." The light intensified, flooding the room with warmth as the shadows began to disintegrate, their forms evaporating into the air like smoke. "You may have won this battle," the voice shrieked, fury lacing its tone, "but I will return. I am eternal, and I will consume you." "Then come back," Emily challenged, her heart pounding in her chest. "I will be ready." With that, the shadows dissipated, leaving only silence in their wake. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, replaced by the warmth of the candles flickering around them. Emily and her father stood panting, the adrenaline coursing through their veins as the weight of the encounter settled upon them. "Did we do it?" she asked, her breath shaky. "I think so," her father replied, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "But we need to remain vigilant. It's not over yet." As they surveyed the room, Emily felt a strange unease settle in her gut. What if it returns? What if it comes for us again? "We prepare," her father said, his voice firm. "We learn everything we can about the darkness and how to confront it. Together, we can face whatever comes." Days turned into weeks, and Emily and her father dedicated themselves to studying the nature of the darkness. They read ancient texts, consulted spiritual guides, and practiced protective rituals, determined to strengthen their defenses against the looming threat. Yet, even as they fortified their home with protective symbols and spells, Emily felt the darkness lingering just beyond the edges of her consciousness. It was a constant reminder of the battle they had fought, and she could sense it waiting, watching, for the moment to strike again. One stormy night, as thunder rumbled outside and rain lashed against the windows, Emily awoke from a restless sleep. She sat up in bed, the air thick with a palpable tension that made her heart race. The shadows in her room seemed to pulse and sway, and she felt a familiar presence creeping in, wrapping around her like a cold mist. "Emily!" a voice whispered, slithering through the darkness. "Come to me!" Fear coiled in her stomach, but beneath it was a spark of defiance. "Leave me alone!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the silence. "I won't give in to you." But the shadows only laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the stillness. "You think you can resist forever? You are bound to me, just as she was. Embrace your fate." "No!" Emily cried, forcing herself to stand, the warmth of the locket pulsing fiercely against her chest. "I am not my mother. I am stronger than you." The darkness surged forward, twisting and coiling around her, trying to pull her back into its depths. "You are weak, Emily," it taunted. "You have no idea what you are capable of. The shadows will always be a part of you." With a surge of adrenaline, she pressed the locket against her heart, drawing on the light that had always been her refuge. "You don't control me!" she shouted, focusing on the warmth radiating from the locket. "I choose to fight!" The light burst forth, illuminating the room with a brilliant glow that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. "No!" the voice screamed, the darkness writhing in pain as it was forced to retreat. "You cannot escape your destiny." But Emily felt a flicker of doubt gnawing at her, a whisper that crept into her mind. "What if it's right?" it hissed. "What if you are just like her?" "Stop!" she yelled, shaking her head as she struggled against the darkness that sought to envelop her thoughts. "I won't listen to you." Suddenly the shadows coalesced into a figure, a dark reflection of herself. Its eyes glinted with malice, and a wicked smile curled on its lips. "Look at you, Emily. You are nothing without me. The light is weak, and soon you will embrace the darkness." "No!" she shouted, determination surging within her. "I won't let you take me." The figure laughed, a sound that echoed with malevolence. "You think you can fight what is inside you? I am your truth, the darkness that dwells in your heart. You cannot deny who you are." With each word, Emily felt her resolve waver, the shadows clawing at her mind, trying to twist her thoughts. But she refused to back down. "You are not my truth," she screamed, pushing back against the darkness with every ounce of strength she possessed. "Face it, Emily," the figure taunted, its form shifting as it pressed closer. "You will always be bound to me. You cannot escape." In that moment, she felt the weight of despair pressing down on her, the shadows swirling like a tempest, threatening to swallow her whole. "I am not afraid," she shouted, focusing on the warmth of her locket, letting the light envelop her completely. As the darkness surged forward, Emily released a blinding flash of light, illuminating the room in a brilliant glow. The shadows recoiled, howling in agony as the brilliance pushed them back. "I will not be consumed," she declared, feeling the power of the light surging through her. banishing the darkness that threatened to engulf her. But even as the light pushed against the darkness, the figure laughed, its voice filled with a chilling certainty. "You cannot defeat me, Emily. I am eternal. I will return. And when I do, you will regret your defiance." With one final burst of energy, Emily directed the light toward the figure, engulfing it in brilliance. The darkness screamed, twisting and writhing in agony as it was consumed, leaving only silence in its wake. Breathing heavily, Emily stood amidst the fading light, her heart racing. The oppressive presence that had haunted her receded, but the fear of its return lingered in the air. "Did we do it?" she whispered, glancing at her father, who stood beside her, wide-eyed and shaken. I think so," he replied, his voice filled with awe and concern. "But it feels like it's just waiting for another chance." As the shadows began to settle once more in the corners of the room, Emily felt a deep sense of unease. "What do we do now?" she asked, looking at her father with uncertainty. "We prepare," he said firmly, resolve returning to his eyes. "We cannot let our guard down. We will continue to fight, to protect what we have." Emily nodded, determination flooding her. "We will face whatever comes next. We are stronger together." In the days that followed, they fortified their defenses, practicing rituals and strengthening their bond. But even as they worked tirelessly, Emily could feel the darkness lurking just beyond their reach, waiting for an opportunity to strike. One night, as they prepared for bed, Emily sensed a change in the air. The shadows felt thicker, heavier, and the familiar chill wrapped around her like a shroud. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "do you feel that?" He turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Yes, it feels different tonight. More oppressive." Suddenly the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into darkness before they returned with a wild flicker. "It's here!" Emily shouted, her heart racing as the shadows coalesced into a swirling mass, forming the figure that had tormented them before. "You cannot escape me!" it howled, its voice echoing through the room like thunder. "I have returned!" As the figure lunged toward them, Emily pressed her locket against her chest, summoning the light once more. "We will not be afraid," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Together!" her father shouted, standing firm beside her. The darkness roared, thrashing violently as they directed the light toward it, but the figure only grew more ferocious, clawing through the air as it sought to envelop them. "You think you can banish me?" it snarled, its voice filled with rage. "I am part of you." "Not anymore," Emily screamed, focusing on the warmth of the locket, pouring every ounce of strength into the light. "We choose to fight!" With a final surge of energy, they unleashed a brilliant explosion of light that pushed the darkness back, illuminating the room with a dazzling glow. The figure shrieked in agony as it was engulfed, its form dissipating into nothingness. As the light faded, Emily and her father stood panting, the shadows retreating once more into the corners of the room. "Did we win?" she whispered, breathless and shaken. "For now," her father replied, his expression serious. "But we must remain vigilant. The darkness will continue to return, seeking to exploit our fears." Emily nodded, determination swelling within her. "Then we will fight together no matter what." But even as they celebrated their victory, Emily felt the weight of the darkness lingering, a constant reminder of the battles they had fought and the ones still to come. The shadows would return, but they would stand strong, united against whatever threats lay ahead. Together, they would face the abyss, resolute in their refusal to be consumed by the darkness.